Welcome to Short Stories. I'm your host, Martin. Today we will read a story called The Golden Bird. It's a story about an unlikely hero who wins 3 fantastic prizes with the help of his magical friend. This is actually a very common type of fairy tale. There are numerous versions of the story all over the globe, in fact. Although the fantastic prizes change in each version of the story, the plot is always the same. I guess you could say that this story is an empty template that any storyteller can fill in. The version we will be reading today is based on the work of the Grimm brothers. By the way, if you are interested in contributing a short story of your own, feel free to use this story as your model. Just change the character's name and what prizes he wins. Add whatever additional details you would like. You can submit your story to me at the Language Center. Vocabulary: dim, dim. Bob was a bit dim, so no one expected him to do well on the test. Simpleton, simpleton. Bob was fired because his boss thought he was a simpleton. Fork in the road, fork in the road. The travelers stopped when they came to a fork in the road. Carouse, carouse. We were carousing all night, so we are very tired now. Bump into, bump into. I bumped into your friend last weekend. Go to meet one's maker, go to meet one's maker. In 2022, Queen Elizabeth II went to meet her maker. Kick in, kick in. The medicine won't kick in for about an hour. Usurper, usurper. The rightful king was killed by a usurper. And now the story. There once was a wealthy man with a very nice garden. In that garden he had a tree that grew golden apples. In the autumn, the rich man and his 3 sons collected the apples to make the most delicious apple cider in the world. But one year there was a problem. One morning, a week before the annual apple harvest, the rich man went into the garden to count the golden apples. To his shock and horror, one was missing. The same thing happened the next day and the next day. The rich man told his sons to stand guard during the night. The oldest son's name was Hans. He was tall and handsome. The second son's name was Franz, who was short but strong. The youngest son was rather average-looking, but he was very honest and a bit dim. For that reason, his brothers always called him Dummy. Hans said, "I've got first watch." Franz said, "I've got second." Then they both said to Dummy, "Ha! You've got third watch, loser." Dummy winced as Franz punched him in the arm. It was now about 3 a.m., and the older brothers were fast asleep. Dummy was keeping a close watch of the apples when he saw something flicker in the corner of his eye. He turned his head and saw a beautiful golden bird. "Whoa!" he muttered to himself. Dummy stood there stupidly as the golden bird picked an apple from the tree. Dummy suddenly remembered his mission and pulled out his bow and arrow. He tried to shoot the bird as it flew away, but he just barely missed it. The arrow grazed the bird's back, and a golden feather floated to the ground. Dummy showed his father the feather. "Holy moly!" exclaimed the rich man. "I gotta get my hands on that bird." He sent his 3 sons into the forest to hunt down the bird and bring it back to him alive. The 2 older sons didn't want Dummy to come along. "Do we have to take him, Dad?" asked Hans. "Yeah, he's so dumb. He'll just slow us down," said Franz. Their father patted them both on the shoulder and said, "Play nice." The three brothers walked for miles and miles down the main road. They decided to camp for the night at the edge of the dark forest. Before they all went to bed, Hans took Franz aside and said, "I don't want to share any glory with that simpleton. I say we ditch him." Franz smiled and said, "Good idea, big bro. Let's wait until he falls asleep." And that is exactly what they did. When Dummy woke up, he couldn't find his brothers. "Where did they go?" he asked. With no idea of what to do, Dummy decided to just continue on his journey down the road through the forest. It was a rather dark forest, darker than any forest Dummy had ever seen. Dummy was so distracted by the creepy forest that he almost didn't notice the fox that stepped out in front of him on the road. "Oh, hello there," greeted Dummy. To his surprise, the fox stood up on his hind legs and said, "How do you do, good sir?" Dummy smiled and said, "Cool, a talking fox." The fox tilted his head and said, "That's not what your brothers said earlier. I offered them advice, but they wanted to kill me. They called me Freak." Dummy lowered his eyes and said, "They call me names too." The fox took pity on Dummy and said, "I will help you on your quest free of charge." The fox explained that up ahead there was a village at a fork in the road. On the left fork was a very fancy inn with lots of music, food, and girls. "Don't stay in that inn," warned the fox. The second inn was on the right fork. It was drab and damp. "Stay on the right path," said the fox. Dummy nodded his head and gave the fox a piece of jerky. "Thanks," said Dummy as he skipped down the path. When Dummy arrived at the fork in the road, he almost forgot which way was left and which way was right. I guess this way," he said, choosing randomly. Fortunately, he chose correctly. "Maybe I'll find my brothers here," he thought. Of course, he did not find them because they had gone to the left fork. As Dummy slept soundly during the night in his bed, Hans and Franz caroused all night in the fancy inn. In the morning, Dummy continued down the right path. Eventually, Dummy came to a huge castle surrounded by a moat. "How will I ever get in?" he wondered. Just then, the fox appeared at his side. "I can help," said the fox. The fox then gave Dummy instructions on how to get in through a secret passage. "When you get inside," continued the fox, "you'll see the golden bird sleeping on a perch between two cages, an iron cage and a golden cage. Very carefully, without waking the bird, put it in the iron cage." Dummy nodded his head and went to work. After some difficulty, Dummy was now inside the castle. He approached the sleeping bird and said, "Now, which cage was it again?" No matter how hard he tried, he could not remember what the fox said. "Golden bird goes in golden cage. That makes sense." He was wrong. The second he put the bird in the golden cage, it squawked so loudly that it alerted the entire castle. The guards were on him in minutes. The guards brought Dummy before their king, who was sitting on the throne next to a young lady. Dummy couldn't help but notice how beautiful she was in her wonderful dress. It was a deep blue dress covered in silver stars. The lady smiled at him, and he smiled back. The king stood up and said, "Who dares to steal my golden bird? What is your name, thief?" Dummy looked at him sheepishly and said, "Dummy, your highness." "And how did you get into my castle?" Dummy explained how he got in. The king looked impressed. "Wow, that's actually pretty clever. You know, I almost feel bad about executing you. But the law is the law. Guards!" But before the guards could do anything, the young lady shouted, "Wait! She then whispered something to the king, whose face first turned red and then white. "It would appear that my daughter has taken a liking to you," the king said. "I have decided not to kill you if you can perform the task that I give you." Dummy said that he was willing. "You must saddle and ride my horse, Hellraiser," the king said while gesturing to the window. Dummy looked out the window and into the courtyard. Below he saw the stables, and in the stables he saw a terrifying horse. It was silver with a black mane. It was at least 20 hands tall and had a wild fire in its eyes as it kicked and jumped across the courtyard. Dummy gulped and said, "May I use the bathroom first?" Dummy paced back and forth in the bathroom. "What am I gonna do? I've never ridden a horse before." Suddenly the fox jumped out of the toilet and said, "I can help." The fox then gave Dummy instructions on how to ride a horse. "Listen carefully," the fox intoned, "because this is the most important thing. Do not use the golden saddle." Dummy decided to repeat everything the fox said so he would not forget. "And use the golden saddle. Got it," Dummy said proudly. "No!" exclaimed the fox as he threw his paws in the air. "That's literally the opposite of what I said." Dummy was silent for a second and said, "What was the first thing you said again?" The fox slapped his forehead with his paw and sighed. He then held out his other paw and gave Dummy 3 little white cubes. "If anything goes wrong, show these to the horse," the fox said. The time came for Dummy to saddle and ride Hellraiser. "Be careful," chuckled the king. "Hellraiser's mood is a bit unpredictable. One minute he's as gentle as a lamb, the next he's as fierce as a lion." Dummy went to the stables and grabbed the golden saddle and placed it on the Hellraiser. Everything was going smoothly until Dummy tried to get on. Hellraiser suddenly reared up on his hind legs and neighed and snorted angrily. Dummy fell on the ground. He could hear the king laughing from the balcony above the stables. Dummy curled up into a ball in a desperate attempt to protect himself from the horse's stamping feet. But to Dummy's surprise, there was no attack. The horse was calm. "Huh?" said Dummy as he picked himself up. When he had fallen, the 3 white cubes plopped out of his pocket. The horse was now happily eating them. "The horse!" shouted the fox from the far end of the courtyard. "Get on the horse!" Dummy did as he was told. He jumped on the horse and rode it out of the courtyard. The guards were chasing him, but Hellraiser was too fast for them. When he approached the front gate, he saw the young lady holding the golden bird in her arms. "Take me with you," she shouted. Dummy stopped and helped the girl climb on. "I know this area well. I can help you escape," said the girl. She gave him directions that allowed them to evade their pursuers. Eventually, they made it back to the fork in the road and the 2 inns. It didn't take Dummy long to bump into his older brothers. He found them standing in the street, arguing with the innkeeper. "No money, no room," shouted the innkeeper. Dummy asked what was going on. He learned that while he was off finding the golden bird, the 2 brothers had stayed behind at the inn, partying and wasting all the money that their father had given them. "Now that you're here, you can help us out," Hans said. Dummy settled the bill with the innkeeper by giving him a feather from the golden bird. Later, they all sat down on the bridge into town to rest and chat. "I'll go get us a couple of rooms at the inn," said the young lady. "Go to the inn on the right," suggested Dummy. Now that Dummy was alone with his brothers, they started questioning him about everything he had done. Dummy, being a very honest man, told them everything. That's when Hans and Franz both developed the same wicked idea. They were going to kill Dummy and take the girl, horse, and bird back to their father and get all the glory. "Is that a fish?" asked Franz, pointing down at the river. Dummy leaned over to look. Hans grabbed him by the legs and flipped him into the water below. "I hope you can swim, moron!" laughed Franz. Hans and Franz then went to the inn and kidnapped the young lady. They tied her up, loaded her onto the horse, and they all headed back into the forest, leaving Dummy to drown. Fortunately, Dummy did not drown. The fox threw a rope to him, which he used to pull himself out of the river. "You really are a fool," scolded the fox. "I know," replied Dummy dejectedly. "Fool or not," said the fox, "no one deserves to be treated this way. I'll help you get the justice you deserve." The fox then told Dummy his plan. 2 days later, Hans and Franz returned home and presented their prizes to their father. "Good work, boys," said their father. "But where is your brother?" "Sadly, father, he has gone to meet his maker," replied Hans, feigning sadness. The father was heartbroken, but he knew that this was a possibility. "At least I still have you two, and with this bird, we'll be even richer than before." They all went into the garden to celebrate. Franz handed the horse to the groom, who fed it something out of his palm. Their father hung the bird's cage on a branch of the apple tree. "A toast," their father began, "to the 2 bravest and most loyal sons a father could have." "Liars!" someone shouted. They all turned to see who it was. It was the young lady from the castle. Hans and Franz almost fainted from terror. "They are lying to you, old man," declared the young lady. "I can prove it. Phoenix, come!" Without warning, the bird flew out of its cage and landed on the young lady's arm. The fox had climbed the tree and opened the cage while everyone's back was turned. "This is my bird," the young lady said. She then recounted everything that had happened so far. She told the rich man about how his 2 loyal sons had pushed Dummy into the river, and about how they had kidnapped her and locked her up in an abandoned cottage. She left out the part where the fox and Dummy rescued her. "Is this true, boys?" asked the rich man. Hans and Franz could only shrug. "It is true," said another voice. It was the groom leading Hellraiser into the garden. "And I can prove it." The groom removed his hood and wig, revealing that he was Dummy. "Son, you're alive!" exclaimed the rich man. "I am, father," said Dummy, "and you might want to back away. Those spicy cubes should be kicking in any second now." Suddenly, Hellraiser lowered his ears and reared up on his hind legs. He charged at Hans and Franz and kicked them over the garden wall. The rich man asked Dummy for forgiveness. "I should have never trusted them," he said. The fox spoke up. "It is time for you to perform the final task." Dummy asked what it was, and he said, "Cut off my head." Dummy's jaw dropped. "What?" But the fox reassured him that this wouldn't kill him. So Dummy took his father's sword and cut off the fox's head. No sooner did he do that than out jumped a tall, handsome man from the fox's skin. "Thank you for everything," said the man. "I am the lady's brother. I have been trapped in that fox skin for a long time." The man explained that the king was a usurper who had forced their mother to marry him. "After our mother died, I tried to overthrow him, but he hired a wizard to turn me into a fox. My sister and I have been planning our escape for some time now. Thanks to you, the spell is broken and my sister is free." The young lady hugged Dummy and gave him a kiss. Dummy and the young lady got married and used the golden feathers to buy a big house for themselves. They lived there comfortably with the horse and the golden bird for many, many years. As for the wicked brothers, the kick they received from Hellraiser gave them minor brain damage, which made them even dumber than dummy. The questions. Number 1. What was in the rich man's garden? A. A pear tree. B. A banana tree. C. An apple tree. D. A cherry tree. The answer is C. An apple tree. Question 2. Which word best describes dummy? A. Slow. B. Simple. C. Naive. Or D. All of the above. The answer is D. All of the above. Question 3. What were the 3 prizes that dummy won? A. A bird, a horse, and a mermaid. B. A horse, a bird, and a lady. C. A bag of money, sugar cubes, and a princess. D. A fox, a lady, and an apple. The answer is B. A horse, a bird, and a lady. Question 4. Who helped Dummy on his quest? A. The king. B. His 2 brothers. C. The innkeeper. Or D. A fox. The answer is D. A fox.